Good evening, everyone. Welcome to what I think is going to be a very exciting and interesting evening, because we're going to introduce you to 6 new members of Congress who, if we all work hard, will absolutely get elected and do a great job in helping us to transform this country. And tonight we're going to hear from Becca Ballant, who is from my own state of Vermont. We're going to hear from Greg Cesar from Texas, Maxwell Frost from Florida, Jonathan Jackson from Illinois, Summer Lee from Pennsylvania, and Delia Ramirez from Illinois. And I have gotten to know all of them, and these are going to be outstanding members of the United States Congress and provide a real breath of fresh air in that institution. And I just want to repeat, these guys have won the Democratic primaries, in some cases after very, very tough campaigns. They are not elected yet. They still need your help. If you are living in their districts or nearby, come out and volunteer. If they ask you for some financial support, please do it. We desperately need these guys in the U.S. House. The other reason that I wanted to do this event tonight is there is a mythology going on from the corporate media and the establishment that progressive politics is on the wane, that we're losing, and that the future is with the establishment and moderation and centrist, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to say as clearly as I can, with these 6 new members coming into the House in January, there will have never, ever been in the modern history of this country more strong progressives in Congress than there will be in January 23. I was elected to the House and took office in 1991, and I can tell you there was nothing like what we will be seeing in Congress next year. So what I want to make clear is that progressives are on the move. We have the issues, I think, that the American people care most strongly about. We are winning, and we're going to continue to win. So with that, let's begin the programming. And we're going to do this in alphabetical order. Becca Ballant is on her way. I think she'll be here later. But we'll begin with Greg Cesar. Greg is a city councilor in Austin, Texas, and is the Democratic Party's nominee for Texas's 35th congressional district. And what I want to ask Greg, and I want to ask all of the candidates, is tell us a little bit about your campaign, how you have brought people together in a grassroots effort. If there were any kind of learning experiences, any moments that really stood out, talk about them. Tell us why you decided to run in the first place, and maybe tell us what you hope to accomplish. So Greg, take it away, 4 or 5 minutes. Love to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Senator, and hi everyone. I'm Greg Cesar here in Texas. I so appreciate your support here in the state and across the country. We ran in a Democratic primary on a pro-worker, progressive, and unapologetic platform and got 4 times the votes of anyone else in this very contested race. And to the Senator's question about what I learned and how the race was, is people said, well, here in the state of fossil fuel, in a district that stretches across 4 counties from East Austin all the way down into San Antonio, should we be holding back on our climate agenda? In a state that is seen as corporate run or a red state, should we be talking about fighting against a better and better lifestyle for Jeff Bezos and instead fighting for the lives of working people? And what I really believed and what we've learned through years of organizing, I've been a labor organizer for years before being a city council member, is that this state and so many places in the South are not red states. We're just under-organized states, where one of our greatest opponents is people not believing that things can ever change, that the elected officials that they vote for can ever actually deliver for working people. And when we inspire folks with that kind of message, that folks can believe and know us because we've done years of community organizing and knocking on doors and building volunteers, that we can make enormous change and shatter that disbelief. Because to me, part of the point of this campaign and the movement that you see happening around the country with all of my colleagues and future colleagues on this call is about reawakening some of the progressive roots of places like Texas. And you might say, well, what are you talking about, Greg? And I don't just mean how huge some of the Bernie Sanders rallies were here in Texas. I mean, just even a little bit before that. Medicaid and Medicare were born here in Texas, signed into law by LBJ from Texas. And if we're going to win Medicare for all, to expand that right to every single person, rich or poor, then we need to be winning from the South, from Texas. The voting rights law also signed into law by a Texan. Roe v. Wade was brought to this country, abortion rights to this country from Texas, when Sarah Weddington, who lived right up the street from here, sued then Dallas District Attorney Henry Wade, brought that case when she was a 20-something-year-old lawyer that had never taken a case to trial before, brought that to the Supreme Court and won abortion rights for all. So even though in my state, while we were running my campaign, we were under the strictest abortion ban in the country, with up to life in prison as a penalty for those who provide this essential form of healthcare. Has to be, I believe, and what we talked to people about was that we have progressive roots, that we have to believe in ourselves. The status quo perpetuates itself by making us think that we're not powerful enough, that nothing we do matters, and that's wrong. And so our election was really about that, and you're seeing that spread across the country, and that's part of why you're seeing all of these progressives getting elected across the state. I was one of 3 open seats in the Democratic primary in Texas, 3 other seats, every single one of them won by a progressive candidate. And I don't think you can separate that from the people organizing at Starbucks across the country. You can't separate that from the fact that we're going to win our first ever nurses union in a generation here in a few weeks in Austin. All of that is interconnected. So I'll end with this because you really want to hear from my other future colleagues with your help, is that folks have asked, how can we have hope in this time where things are so dark and difficult? And I look to Rebecca Solnit, a great activist and author, for her definition of hope, which is that hope is not a lottery ticket that you get to clutch to make yourself feel better at home. Hope is an axe that you use to take down doors in case of emergency. Hope is an action. And it's that kind of thing I saw when we had our entire power grid shut down in Texas, and constituents without water for weeks, freezing in their homes. Ted Cruz got on a plane and went to the beach. Governor Abbott went on Fox News. But it was local working people that went and fixed the pipes. It was our IBW electricians that got the electricity back on. It was our everyday public employees that brought folks together into their homes in the warmth. When Trump tried to deport people here in my state and separate families, it was union teachers that hid their kids in their own homes. That is the energy, and that is what we're trying to all tap into all across the country. Because if you can have that here in Texas, you can have it anywhere. And that's exactly why you're seeing all these great candidates win their races. I'm so excited and have hope because of Delia and Maxwell and Summer and Becca and Jonathan. And we couldn't do that without all of you and without, of course, the real voice that the senator has brought to our races.
Greg, thank you very much. All right, Becca Ballant has joined us. Becca obviously is from my own state, the state of Vermont. She ran a really brilliant grassroots campaign taking on an establishment candidate. I think a lot of people didn't think she would win, but she did. Becca, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Senator. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Okay, great. I am in the airport, so if you hear some announcements in the background, my apologies in advance. I am so excited to speak to all of you and to thank publicly Senator Sanders for not just endorsing my race, but campaigning with me. That was such a tremendous boost and gave us so much wind beneath my wings, lots of energy. And this was a campaign about regular people. That's what I wanted it to be from the beginning. And as Senator Sanders just said, there were quite a few establishment figures who lined up with my opponent and did not think that I could win. I had a 7% name recognition in the first poll, 7%. But in the end, we won by double digits. And we won because we ran a campaign that was about regular people. It was about teachers and firefighters and first responders and all of those people that I had come in contact with as a teacher and also as a state senator. And we ran on a platform of, what is it that families need right now? They need help with childcare. They need help with minimum wage increases, healthcare affordability. They also need someone who believes that we can bring people together. We had a broad coalition supporting my campaign. And one thing I wanted to say to all of you is the thing that surprised me the most about this campaign was not that we won, because I believed from the beginning that we could do it if we got in front of, regular Vermonters, thousands of people interacting with our campaign. The thing that surprised me the most was that everywhere I went in Vermont, people said, I don't want to hate my neighbors anymore. We've got to be able to talk about policy without screaming at each other, without hating each other. They said, I don't want to hate my neighbors anymore. And so that gave me so much hope to be able to talk about consequential issues in a way that was meaningful for them, and for people to understand that I am doing this on behalf of all of the people, all my constituents. And it helped so much that I had come up as a public school teacher, as a union member, that I could speak to the challenges also in our schools right now, and the healthcare crisis facing so many students and their families. So I'm going to be supporting working families the entire time. I'm honored to serve in the House. Most immediately, I want to make sure we're dealing with our housing crisis, because that is crippling so many families, and the mental health crisis. So I want to make sure I turn it over to other folks on the call. It's been lovely to get to know Greg Cesar, and I'm looking forward to getting to know the rest of my incoming colleagues. And again, I can't thank you enough, Senator Sanders, for believing in me. I really, really appreciate it so very much.
Becca, thank you very much, and thanks for the great campaign you ran. Now we're going to go to Florida, and we're going to talk to someone who will be clearly one of the youngest members of the House of Representatives, Maxwell Frost, who will represent Florida's 10th Congressional District. Maxwell, congratulations on your great campaign, and thanks for being with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Senator. Thank you for endorsing our campaign, and thank you to everyone who's tuning in. My name is Maxwell Alejandro Frost. I'm a musician, I'm an advocate, I'm an organizer, Gen Zer, and Democratic nominee for Congress here in Orlando, Florida. I got involved in advocacy 10 years ago because of the Sandy Hook shooting. A few years after that, we'd have a devastating shooting here in Orlando where we lost 49 Angels at the Pulse nightclub. A few months after that, I would survive a shooting myself in downtown Orlando on Halloween. And, for me, I think as an organizer, our greatest tool is our story. And I think the way we won this campaign is by ensuring that everything that we did, every door that we knocked, every phone call that we made was about the story of me. It was a story about us. It was a story about now and how we're going to move forward together. It's a story about our teachers who were, we joined on the picket because they got a 25-cent raise. Yes, you heard that right. 25-cent raise after all the work they did during COVID. It was about the story of our organizers who hit the streets to say Black Lives Matter and were tear gassed and were maced or arrested. I was arrested with them 2 years ago, right? It was a story about the working class families here in Orlando that build out of the life and blood of this great, amazing city, yet a lot of times get the blunt of the bargain, right, when we're talking about what's going on here in the city and in the state. And when we look at this year, it has been an incredibly rough year for Floridians. I mean, I don't like to talk about our governor, but our governor has essentially scapegoated every single vulnerable community for all of his failures. And I think a lot of times people look at our governor and paint Florida in the same picture. And I want to tell everyone listening, we're not all like him, right? We have millions of poor and working class families just crying out for a better world, that want to have a union that represents them, that wants to have health care, that want to live in a world free of gun violence. And when I think about the reason I got involved, it was because of the Sandy Hook shooting. It was because I met the survivors of that shooting. It's because I sat across from a guy named Matthew Soto. His sister, Vicky, was a teacher that when she heard the gunshots, she hid the kids in cabinets. And seeing the pain, right, in his eyes, seeing a 16-year-old crying with the demeanor of a 60-year-old over a sister who was murdered for going to school. I remember at 15 years old, I ran into the hotel room. I was crying, and I said, for the rest of my life, I'm going to fight for a world where no one has to feel the pain I saw Matthew feel that night. And we know people feel that type of pain. It's avoidable pain for many different reasons. And it all boils down to policy failures. And the way that we're going to course correct is by getting good, bold politicians, morally just progressives, into office all across the country. And this year has shown us that the progressive movement doesn't exist in a bubble, which sometimes when you turn on the news and you hear the pundits, they like to make it seem like we exist in a vacuum, but we don't. We're in Texas, we're in Florida, we're in South Carolina, we're all across the country. And, you know, this is a state that people shouldn't give up on. Right. This is my favorite soapbox, is talking about how great Florida is and how much people should really invest in this. Don't give up on Florida, because we have millions of working class families crying out for a better life. Don't give up on Florida, because we voted for a $15 minimum wage 2 years ago. We voted to give voting rights to 1.6 million people with previous felonies. Don't give up on Florida, because just less than a month ago, the Democrats here in Central Florida nominated a progressive Afro-Cuban 25-year-old organizer to represent them in the United States Congress. And that's really what gives me so much hope in this time. So don't give up on our movement. It's all about love, because you know, when you love somebody, you want them to live free of gun violence. When you love somebody, you want them to have live in a sustainable environment. When you love somebody, you want them to have affordable housing and to live their best life. And at the end of the day, that's what this movement is about. When people ask me why during this campaign trail, when we talk about Medicare for all, and they go, well, why do we deserve that? We have to be able to look our constituents or friends or family in the face and say, you deserve to be healthy by virtue of being a human. And that's it. Nothing else. Nothing more. And that's a message. I don't care if you're Democrat, Republican, moderate, whatever. That's a message that's about our humanity. And that's what our movement as progressives is all about. So again, honored to be here with y'all. I wouldn't be a good organizer if I didn't tell you to do something. So just make sure that before this call ends, that you go to the websites of any of these candidates, right? Everyone here is great. Sign up to make some phone calls. If you're in a district, sign up to make some doors. Because, you know, law, medicine, politics, I mean, that's about sustaining life. But culture, art, love, family, that's about making life worth it. And our movement is about building a world that's worth it for everybody. So again, thank you so much for having me on, Senator.
Thank you very much, Maxwell. Congratulations on your campaign. Our next speaker is Jonathan Jackson. Jonathan is the Democratic nominee for the 1st Congressional District, Illinois, and I've known Jonathan for a number of years. Jonathan, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. I am so proud to be on this call and proud to be in your company once again. Thank you, Senator Sanders, for coming to Chicago and campaigning with me and Delia. I really appreciate that boost. Ladies and gentlemen, I've had the pleasure of meeting Senator Sanders when I was 22 years old in Vermont. My father, Reverend Jesse Jackson, was campaigning in Vermont. And then Senator Sanders was the only Caucasian elected official in the nation to endorse an African-American Baptist preacher that was running for Congress. And Senator Sanders, I cannot express to you how much that meant to me, that we were coming from the South Side in the city of Chicago, and then to have your open arms there, and then to learn your history of fighting for segregation, fighting against segregation here in the city of Chicago as a young person. So now, fast forward 34 years later, I look forward to being under the rotunda, being an ally of yours on the field. Why did I join this race? I looked at the talent that was showing up to participate, and I said, I think I can do better. I want to represent this community. One thing that's unique about this district is this has been led by African Americans since 1929. This district is very unique in that it's the longest serving district in America for African Americans. It's the first congressional district of Illinois. In the first 2 decades of this new millennium, 261,000 African Americans have moved out of the Chicagoland region. And that's primarily for 2 reasons, because of opportunity and because of safety reasons. Every week of my campaign, there was some gun violence by a staff member, a family member in the organization, or volunteer. And so we ran on a 3-point program against guns, gasoline, and groceries. Guns was talking about the safety issues that we're facing here. And there have been tragedies in Uvalde and in Buffalo and other places. Chicago has 40 shootings a weekend. We have in Uvalde, and people have become desensitized to it. But now there's this gun violence grappling our smaller cities in the district. And so there's a lot of outreach. If we weren't talking about COVID, we'd be talking about opioids and guns. They would be the major killers of children in our country right now. I use gas as a metaphor to talk about infrastructure and access to transportation for working people. Oftentimes, in the words of Reverend Martin Luther King, our communities are put on an island of poverty surrounded by affluence. And that's a fact of infrastructure and transportation. So I'm going to be talking about that a lot on how do we get our communities connected. There's a historical pattern of bypassing communities of colors that we have to address in this infrastructure package. And the last part is on groceries. The standard of living, people cannot keep up with the food and the basic necessities of life. So those are the three short issues. And I want to be an advocate for peace. I know that you have to practice peace. You have to be willing to fight for peace. You have to sacrifice for peace. You have to do things that are not necessarily popular, but things that are right. So I look forward to joining all of you all as colleagues and friends. And our district has, we had 18 people to make the ballots in this congressional race. And I went up against three persons that had the endorsement of a 30-year incumbent Congress person, a 20-year incumbent senator, a 20-year incumbent city council alder person. But I had come to the aid of the bus drivers and the CTA and the rail workers. When I found out that 50% of our bus drivers were female, although I wasn't riding the bus, but I used to take it in high school, and found out they were wearing diapers because they didn't have a place to relieve their bodies in the middle of their shifts, driving in the midnight in some very dangerous neighborhoods. And a lot of people came back to support. So for that, I'm grateful. I want to say congratulations to each and every one of you. If there's a way that I can be helpful, please count me in. I'm moving around the country to assist other candidates, and thank you for all your support, and prayers to you all.
Jonathan, thank you very much. And again, congratulations on your great victory. Our next speaker is Summer Lee. Summer is currently in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives, and she is the Democratic nominee for Pennsylvania's 12th Congressional District. Summer, thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me, for having us, Senator. It's always exciting and just an honor and super hopeful to be with you, to be with all of the rest of these folks on this call and some of the others who have already preceded us into Congress. And this is a moment, right? This is a moment that we can't let escape us, and we have to keep it in perspective. So I'm so excited to be here because, you know, in Pennsylvania and Pittsburgh and Western PA, where I came from, 4 or 5 years ago, no one would have believed that anyone like us would ever come out of an area like mine. And no one would ever believe that we would be able to get not just, you know, a Black woman, which we have never had from Pennsylvania at all, go to Congress, anybody who was progressive, somebody from a poor and working class neighborhood. But I'm honored to have come out of a movement that has really swept this region by storm. And I believe, and I hope we've been here creating a blueprint for how we can get progressive wins that center the most marginalized, that center Black and brown folks and working class folks and poor folks. We've been centering workers, and we've been connecting, as Greg said, thinking and really elevating how important it is to have a movement that is electoral, progressive movement that goes hand in hand with our labor movement, hand in hand with our movement for Black lives, hand in hand for our movement for climate justice, hand in hand with our housing justice movement. And I believe that that's really how we've been able to be successful. So for folks who have not, who don't know, I have been a state rep for the last 4 years. And in 2018, I decided to run for office, and it's not something that I'd ever considered to do, but it was an organizing opportunity. And as an organizer and as an activist, it really felt like this was a time that we needed to have people who had lived experiences, people who were impacted by the issues that other folks go and legislate every day. It was an opportunity for us to really start to consider and change who we're centering in our politics and in our policies. We hear a lot about people who talk about being progressive, and I'm proud that, and you know that, Senator, that our progressive movement is growing and is getting stronger, because even candidates who have no progressive bona fides, they are talking about and they call themselves progressive on their mailers. But I think that what is important about now and important about this cohort is that we're showing that progressive isn't just our policies, though they're important, but progressive is the way we do our politics. We have been building with people in this region who have never seen themselves reflected in our politics. We have folks who had never had a candidate for any office ever knock on their door, any office ever call them and say, will you come and work with us? Will you come and help us to connect you to resources? Will you come and join us and be a part of a community with us? And when we did that, when we went out and we knocked on more doors than anybody had seen in this region, when we talked and expanded the electorate and included people who typically aren't your super voters, who folks were including, when we went to tenants and when we went to nurses and when we went to our unionizing Starbucks workers and baristas, when we went to those folks and we included them, we sparked a movement that hasn't stopped yet. And when folks came in with dark money into this race, to try to influence it, to try to tell the people of my region that what they believed and what they cared about wasn't actually true, or try to take from us what we have been working on for so long. I'm so honored to have been embraced by a movement, not just in Pittsburgh, but all over, that saw what was happening and said that we have to come together because our region, our country deserves so much better, and that we are so much closer to getting there because we are doing this together. So I'm proud that we came out of one of the tougher primaries in this cycle, right? We had millions of dollars thrown at us because we are fighting for Medicare for all, because we are fighting against the fossil fuel industry, where we are in a community that has some of the worst air quality in the nation on any given day, where we have kids who have higher rates of asthma and COPD, respiratory illnesses, cancer. And people are telling us that we have to accept that because of jobs that some of us will never even be able to get. We have learned in Western Pennsylvania that we don't have to accept the lesser of two evils, that we don't have to accept false dichotomies of what's possible, that we can actually expand the realm of what's possible through our organizing, through our activism, as Maxwell said, through our love. And we, because we have done that, engaged in this movement, we haven't just won this congressional seat, but we've won state house seats, we've won school board races and city council races and county council races, a mayor. We got the first Black mayor in Pittsburgh because of this movement that we have been engaged in. So we are honored to keep this one going, because we know that these systems weren't built overnight. And I know that there are so many people who are looking to our progressive movement and they're saying, why aren't we moving faster? Or what can we do to bring about Medicare for all faster? And the reality is that because these systems aren't built overnight, they're not going to be dismantled overnight, but we have fighters now. We are electing fighters every cycle all across the country in places where we can't afford to give up. Right, from Western Pennsylvania, where we can prove, like in Texas, that if we can win on a Green New Deal here, we can win it anywhere. If we can win on criminal legal reform, we can win it anywhere. If we can win on racial justice, we can win it anywhere. And that's what's so important about this movement. And that's why it's so important that for folks who are watching, recognizing that our efforts aren't in vain. We are winning. We are winning people, souls every day. Every election cycle, we increase the amount of folks who come out and vote, but not just vote. The amount of folks who get up every day and feel like we are actually working towards something that will affect them. I see people in Pittsburgh who had never participated before who are now knocking doors. People who had never engaged who are now running for magistrates and running for school boards so that they can impact their own communities. We are connecting people with where they are in the system and helping them to understand how we can actually collectively lift up all of us, right? So that's why it's so important that we stay tuned in, that we continue to connect. If yours is not a district that has a progressive yet, let us be a blueprint. Lean on us as we are figuring out and showing the way for other folks, because we can win these races. We can win on this message. We can win on Medicare for all. We can win that in rural communities and urban and suburban and exurban. We can win on housing justice in each of those communities. We can win on racial justice, and we can't allow the right to convince us that our neighbors are more selfish than they actually are, because people actually want to have prosper for each other. We want to see our neighbors doing okay. We want to see our workers surviving and not just getting along. We want to see a country that comes out of COVID-19 and into something better, a country that's post the insurrection, right? But we have to go and fight for that every single day. So this there is no better group of people to be fighting with every single day than this group, to be led by our senator who has been in the trenches for so long and deserves every bit of reinforcements that are coming in. So I just wanted to thank you all. I want to thank everybody who has been chipping in, whether it's $5 or $10. We are a movement of grassroots donors. Every bit counts. If you have come from all over the country to knock on doors with each of us, because I know you have, those doors have made a difference. That's how we won. So don't stop now. Let's keep going. Let's get through to November, and let's continue to expand our numbers and expand the electorate and continue to win every single day.
Okay. Thank you, Summer, and congratulations on your really great campaign. Last but certainly not least is Delia Ramirez, who is a member of the Illinois House of Representatives and the Democratic nominee for Illinois' 3rd Congressional District. Delia, thanks so much for being with us. Congratulations on your victory.
Thank you, Senator. And it's so great to be last because I get an opportunity to fully be present and hear from who's going to be my family in Congress and who's going to add on to the work that all of you, Senator, and many friends of ours are already doing. So I just want to tell you just how excited I am and how much energy. I came in to the Zoom tired and thinking I should probably get some more coffee. And after summer right now, I'm like, man, that's my caffeine right there. So thank you all for being my caffeine and the partnerships we're building as we work to represent our districts, but really the country after the general election. I ran in a district that was created through redistricting to give Latinos in the state of Illinois greater representation. It was a district that was reflective of a community that's changing and that was migrating outside of the city because of gentrification and many of the things that Jonathan talked about into the northwestern suburbs. And interestingly enough, the district that I just won a primary in, the 2nd largest county in this district, half of its geography, it's in a county that 10 years ago was the 2nd most Republican county in the entire state of Illinois. And when folks in the community asked me to run, I said, I don't know about me. We got to find a progressive that's going to run and a unifier and someone that can speak to most progressive parts of the city and the Logan Square northwest side of the Chicago, and also the people on the most western part of the city, of the district. Many of them who've never, ever had a Democrat member of Congress, in some cases up until 2 years ago. But running for Congress in this moment for me is personal, and I'll tell you why. I am the daughter of immigrants. I'm the daughter of a man who's in his 70s, had to forcefully retire after getting kidney cancer. And instead of getting a pension, instead of having some kind of long-term stability when he had to retire, this industrialized bakery that did its job to union bust every single corner and every single moment, they gave him a frozen pie on his last day. I'm the daughter of this man who has to worry in his 70s how he's going to be able to keep up with the home that he raised his family in, while also how he pays for his Medicare supplemental. And I'm also the daughter of a woman who's in her 60s, a home care worker who's making minimum wage and on Medicaid because she literally can't afford health care and she can't afford her diabetes medication if she tries to go into the insurance program that her employer offers. And I'm the daughter of these immigrants who have proudly given so much to this country, but also the wife of a DACA recipient who understands front and center the broken immigration system we're in. And so for me, running is an urgency to build on some of the work that we've been able to do here in the state of Illinois. You see, having a Democratic majority is important, but having progressives in that majority, to me, is extremely important. In the last few years in the state legislature and the General Assembly, we finally were able to pass a bill to raise the minimum wage to $15. I had the honor to be able to author a bill to expand Medicaid healthcare coverage to undocumented individuals, regardless of legal status, the first in the nation. We codified Roe v. Wade in 2019. And in the midst of the pandemic, I had the honor to also author legislation to seal eviction filings for anyone that was about to lose their home during the pandemic. That didn't just happen because we have a majority Democrats. That's extremely important. But it happened because our General Assembly looks very different than it looked 3 years ago. There are more progressives in the General Assembly than we ever had before. And we know how to organize because most of us come from organizing. This is the exciting opportunity, as Senator Sanders talks about, having the most progressives ever in DC. And for me, it's really, really clear. When we've talked about the threat to our democracy and what happened January 6th, it's not only insurrectionists who are threatening our democracy. I know clearly front and center that in Illinois, but across the country, that the corporations who continue to co-opt the legislative process are what are in the way of Medicare for all, are what in the way of being able to pass a Green New Deal, are what in the way to be able to have housing justice and affordable housing for all, and certainly are in the way to finally make sure that people like my uncle who've lived in this country for 35 years can finally have a pathway to be able to legally live here, residency, and a pathway to citizenship. This is why for me, being here, being part of this movement is so important, because we need organizers on the inside and we need organizers on the outside. And that is how we're going to move the needle. And people that are willing to speak truth to power and demonstrate that we can actually get things done. Because I know that oftentimes people say, oh, progressives, they talk a lot. They won't know how to move the needle. We are proof that we can move the needle because for us, this is personal. So what I look forward to, certainly all the issues that my colleagues talked about, to literally handlock in partnership to do that work and to build the voter block necessary to be able to finally move the legislation and maybe make some of our friends and new colleagues uncomfortable and feeling like, yeah, maybe I need to start moving the needle and also become a co-sponsor to Medicare for All. Maybe we do need to talk about immigration and actually do something about it because we have a crisis and it is a humanitarian crisis. And I look forward to doing that work with everyone here because it is clear to me that we only win when we organize. And having won in a brand new congressional district, becoming the first Latina in the nation, I wish that was the case and that was a long, long time ago. What I mean, the first Latina in the entire Midwest to go to Congress, the daughter of immigrants and the daughter of a woman that walked 1,835 miles, pregnant of me, so that I can be in this country, is a testament that people on the ground and grassroots leaders deserve to be in the places of power to move the needle so that we can create justice for all of us. I'm excited about that. And we got to win on November 8th because we have a lot of work to do for Senator Sanders and the congressional delegation of progressives and the senators that are progressive also to move the needle on the issues we care about. And I'm rooted and I'm ready to do that with all of you.
Delia, thank you so much. I gotta say, on a personal level, I feel very good. Just listening to these 6 people really gives me an enormous amount of hope for the future of this country. And all of us in the progressive movement should be very proud of these candidates, and we've got to make sure that all of them for sure get to the Congress. Let me start off. We received dozens and dozens of questions, and I'm kind of going to merge them into a little bit different questions. I think almost everybody talked about healthcare. I don't know if the viewers or even if the members here have seen a new AP poll that came out just the other day. They asked the American people, what do you think about the current healthcare system? And what the people said in so many words, it stinks, it's dysfunctional, it's inefficient, it's outrageously expensive, we're nervous about healthcare. So let me just throw out a question. And I think Maxwell raised this issue. Use the word rights, human rights. What are we entitled to? It seemed to me, and I know to all of you, but I'd like you to amplify it and talk about your district, maybe your own lives. Why is healthcare a human right? Simple question. Who wants to jump in? Greg, do you want to take a shot at that?
Of course, it's the fact of the matter is, to me, as Maxwell said, We've been fed so many lies, and ultimately, sometimes those lies lead to someone else's profit. But when you peel it back, democracy is how we care for one another. This whole system, all of this stuff, is how we actually come together and decide how we want our society to run. And if there was just one basic thing that we should all be able to agree on, is that the basic way of caring for one another should be to provide everyone healthcare. And what's even more stunning about the fact of the US healthcare system is that the way that it's working right now not only works so poorly, but also that it costs us more and gets us worse results. So that might make you pull your hair out and say, well, then why don't we deliver it as a human right? And ultimately comes down to that it benefits a small number of people that are making profit. And so, folks have asked, well, how is a minority of people, a smaller number of progressives in Congress, really going to deliver change? But I think that's the wrong question, when the right question is, who is really the minority? If the vast majority of us know that you shouldn't have to have a GoFundMe campaign to pay for basic medication. And so we just have to mobilize that majority and lean on folks as the viewers to organize. I'm glad we can lean on each other now as more progressives in Congress that believe this, but we need to really mobilize that majority that just know that this is a baseline right in a democracy.
Who wants to talk about healthcare? Maybe some of what you bumped into, some of the stories that folks on the campaign trail told you about healthcare.
Yeah, I'd love to hop in on this. When we're out knocking doors and we're talking with folks, my district has had an increase in violence a lot in the past year, 2 years. And when you talk with people about the causes of the violence, when you look at the numbers, you find out that most crime, especially gun violence, are crimes of condition. People have been pushed to the brink. People who have been choosing between their prescription drugs and their rent. People have been choosing between going to the doctor's office and being able to put food on the table. And one of the things that just gives me so much hope about the progressive movement is we take a step back, right? The opposition wants us to see these issues siloed. Here's healthcare, here's gun violence, but what we know to be true is, to end gun violence, we need to build a world where people don't feel the need to use a gun to solve their problems in the first place. And when we pass Medicare for all, and people have healthcare as a human right, and people don't have to worry about that, violence will go down in all of our communities. It's an issue that will put people in a better place to think about how they can be more civically engaged because they'll have more money in their pockets in a world where no one has to spend more than $200 a year on life-saving and prescription drugs, in a world where people can go to the doctor and get the mental health care they deserve because it's so stigmatized in this country. And so it's really an issue that, yes, impacts the economy and impacts healthcare, but impacts every other issue. It can hopefully be the key to unlock a whole new generation of people who, let's be frank, there's so many folks in this country now who are just going through so much that it's hard for people to be paying attention, right, to what's going on. And I don't blame them. And when we do our job and we're able to get the bold, transformational change we need for folks, I think we have a whole new level of the progressive movement coming up. And so Medicare for all is a key to unlock the progress for this country, I really think.
Anyone else want to jump in on healthcare? Jonathan, did I see you? Yeah. Jonathan, you're muted.
Gotcha.
Got it.
Am I on now? Okay.
Yep.
My mother and father are 78 and 80, and over the last year, I've had to go to the hospital quite a bit to visit them when they've had issues, and have had to go for other reasons with campaign staff members, workers, into the emergency room. And the healthcare system is much worse than I ever imagined. Since you were speaking about this, Senator Sanders, to see people at Northwestern University in the Gold Coast of Chicago having to get ready to spend the night in the lobby area where the draft is coming in simply because they did not have insurance. I've seen people that would arrive later with insurance, get to a bed, and those that might have been sicker or even bleeding, sitting in the lobby. That broke my heart, only to go upstairs to visit other people and walk past empty beds. So I found that very repulsive. I've worked with teachers, some of my students, former students at the community college and at the university level here in the city of Chicago. And thank you, Senator Sanders, for coming out and fighting to keep our university open when it was facing foreclosure here in the heart of the South Side that now has our nursing program. To see nurses that are now being burnt out, and we're about to face a nursing shortage. I want you to know there's also other variants to this pandemic that are going to continue to grow. I want people to know that COVID is not over yet. There's some other strands out there that are coming. And to see people have to see these medical bills, even from dental bills, disease starts in the mouth and then goes all throughout the body. And why dental isn't covered in our health care is absolutely horrendous. And the last thing I'll let you know is that this district, like Baltimore and many other cities, this district specifically covers parts of Inglewood, and Streeterville in downtown, where Northwestern is, from Inglewood is about 7 miles, 5 miles. We have the longest, the greatest disparity in life expectancy in the nation, 30 years. 90 years in Streeterville, 60 years. So why did I run? Is I want to close the gap, and I want to get out of partisan politics. And this isn't political for me. And I want to be a statesman like you, Senator Sanders, doing what's right, speaking truth to power, and closing those gaps. So,
thank you very much, Don. And you know, this is an issue dear to my heart, one I've worked on for years. I mean, Jonathan just makes one of a million points that could be made. Think about it. In the United States of America, if you are rich, the likelihood is you will live 10, 15, 20 years more than low-income people or working-class people. Money equals years of life. How outrageous is that? How insane is it that you got 1 out of 4 people who can't afford the prescription drugs their doctors prescribe, and on it goes. We don't have enough doctors. We don't have enough nurses. We don't have enough dentists. And that situation is getting worse. So I know that all of us are united in understanding that healthcare is a human right, that it's insane that we're spending almost twice as much per person on healthcare as any other people, and yet 70 million of us are uninsured or underinsured. So let me throw out another question here. This is a tough one. We may have disagreements. On one hand, you have a Republican Party that wants to give tax breaks to billionaires, that is not prepared to take on the pharmaceutical industry, that a few years ago attempted to throw over 30 million Americans off of the health care they have, a party that in no way wants to raise the starvation minimum wage, $7.25 an hour, a party that does not believe that young people have a right to a higher education, etc., etc. And yet more and more working class people are drifting toward that party. All right? Question, how does that happen? What does it say about where the Democratic Party is? Who wants to jump in on that one? Somewhere I see you smiling. All right. You've thought about this.
You said that is like, it's one of those questions that may be a setup, but honestly, it's the question that we are going to have to reconcile. And I think that there are a number of reasons. And I think that the moment that we are in right now seems so stark. It seems like there is such a wide chasm between what, you know, as folks talk about both sides, like when they say the right, the extreme right, and when they talk about, you know, us, those of us who are fighting for working class people, those of us who care about our air, care about folks' access to healthy living and a living wage and protections, right? When we see that growing chasm, what we're really seeing now is an era in American history that we have never been in before. There was a time where a call that featured rising Congress folks would not have a room full of Black and brown people in it. There may not be any women in it at all. There would probably be, and if they were young, they would probably not be working class. They'd probably have come from a particular background with particular connections and in a revolving door and an endless cycle, right? That would last for many, many generations. And their grandchildren would still reap the benefits of whatever it is that elder had in that community. But what we're seeing right now is a growing awareness. It's a growing activism of people who are looking at the stark inequalities in our country, the stark injustices in our country. We're looking at what is possible as we are now becoming a more global community, and we're seeing other countries that are offering their citizens healthcare or education, universal programs that our country is trying to convince us that we can't have. And the real reason that we can't have it is because we have this history that we have not reconciled, and we are refusing to do so. But there are so many people in our country now, a growing number in our country, who are no longer disempowered to stop that from happening. Right? There are so many more people who are enfranchised, people who are empowered, who are saying that where we've been is not where we should be going. And it's an uncomfortable moment that we're in, right? It's an uncomfortable place to be. Even when we talk about the nostalgia for bipartisanship, right? What does it look like to be friends with the people who will vote against your community's livelihood? Well, that gets harder and harder when you're still in that community, right? It gets harder and harder when it's you at the other end of the yes or no button, right? And as more of us are getting into office and we are sounding the alarm, and then we are now organizing and expanding the electorate and bringing in people who usually didn't participate, right? I don't believe we're seeing some people leave a party or maybe some people who are going or are becoming more conservative. They already were conservative. And what we have to do right now, and I think that the folly and the trap that maybe our party, Democrats, are falling into is we're at a divide, right? We're at a fork in the road. Are we going to go in this direction? Or are we going to go in this direction? Are we going to be the party of the people, the party of working class folks, the party of Black and brown and indigenous folks, working class folks? Or are we going to be a party of corporations? Are we going to be the party of billionaires? Are we going to be the party, that turns and buries their head as an insurrection continues to an ongoing insurrection happens? And that's an uncomfortable conversation for the Democratic Party to have because it has to choose. And I think that when we see people who are leaving, some of those folks were naturally going to go. But what we are seeing and what we can have the opportunity to do as a party is embrace the people who we would have if we invested in them. We talk about swing voters and we focus all of our resources on people who swing from Democrat to Republican. And those people usually look a certain way and sound a certain way. It's a certain type of person. But there are another group of swing voters, people who swing Democrat to non-vote. They're the people who maybe never see themselves represented. They're the people who are on the eviction list. They're the people who are seeing a system that's stacked against them. And we need to have answers for them. And that's why we're losing people in both directions.
Good. All right, let me stop you then. First, is Becca on? Because I don't see Becca on the screen. Becca, you there? Oh, we lost Becca. Okay. Let me pick up where Summer left off. And, I get into trouble all of the time. So you guys are new. I don't want to get you into too much trouble before you even took office, But I think someone raised the question. Look, it's no great secret. Like Republicans, Democrats raise huge amounts of money from the wealthy and the powerful. Most of you have already run against corporate Democratic money. Is that right, Summer? You got a little bit of that coming into Pittsburgh? And others have as well. All right. So Summer says we got a choice to make. Do we go where the money is? A lot of billionaires out there will contribute to the Democratic Party. A lot of people in the pharmaceutical industry, and the healthcare industry, and the fossil fuel industry. Or do we have the guts to go to the dispossessed? People can't afford their rent. People have given up on politics, whether they're Black or white or Latino or Native American, Asian American, whatever they may be. All right, thoughts on this one? Greg, you got a thought?
Yeah, I think this connects exactly to what Summer was talking about and to your last question, that it's ultimately self-defeating. I think that's why I don't take corporate PAC money. That's why I think where we're most successful is when we show that we actually are fighting for working class people. Because to your earlier question of why are we seeing some working class folks move over to the Republican Party? We see so often that people go try to run a poll to say if we say the right magic words, it's going to fix it all. But people are smart. people don't care just what you say, they care about what it is we do. And part of why I ran for city council was I was a labor organizer in Austin. It's supposed to be this progressive oasis in Texas, but there were city workers and city contractors making $7.25 with no health care back in 2015. So the chasm between what people said they were about, but what they were actually doing for working class people, that creates a vacuum that gets filled up. So by taking big corporate PAC money and saying we're not actually going to help working class people, that ultimately helps create that vacuum for the right wing. And that once you let go of that and say we're going to actually fight for working people, just in a few years we went from 725 to, in 2 weeks, the minimum for anybody on a city contract or city land or working for the city here will be $20 an hour. There's no big city we've found that has a better wage than that for the lowest paid workers. And that shows what you're about instead of just says what you are about. And I think that is what it is that we can start to do, because now we might not be so lonely. There's going to be other members of Congress, other people that you all sent to DC that are on the same program. And that helps because there's strength in those numbers.
Who else wants to jump in? Jonathan, you're right. I was with your dad way back when, and he had to take on the entire Democratic establishment. It wasn't only a racial issue, but it was an economic issue. What are your thoughts about where the Democratic Party is, where it has to go? Mute.
I think we should clearly articulate part of the charter I'm trying to work on now is I'm fighting for economic, social, and racial justice. I think one of the reasons also I decided to run for this district in particular is that its long history in the African-American community. And we have to discuss the racial justice issue. I think it's been scapegoated, it's been pushed under the rug, and there's a way to have this conversation if people want to be nuanced and just say it's economics. I've taught economics, I've got an MBA, I've done all that stuff. I know many of those persons that you're talking about, Senator Sanders, and it's just not economic, it's also racial, it's also justice. You can see this in the zip codes, the zone improvement plan. You can see this across every industry, standard industrial code that has to be confronted. I will leave a note on this, as I had the opportunity to have a student at Chicago State on the South Side, a young lady from Germany. And I had asked her, hey, this is great. I've got to get to Germany. It's on my things to do list. I want to see what happened after the wall came down with East and West Germany. Tell me something about East Germany and what it's like. And the young lady was just dumbfounded. She was like, she couldn't answer. She didn't know what I was talking about, only to find out that after the Berlin Wall came down, East Germany spent, West Germany, the powerhouse, committed over $1 trillion to uplifting Eastern Germany. Ultimately, it cost $2 trillion. And now 25 years later, there is no disparity in life expectancy between East and West Germany. They closed the gap. So I want to be on the battlefield to talk about political will, and I have to talk about the racial component. These zip codes in every city in America, life expectancy, healthcare, job discrimination, lack of economics flowing through there, have a strong redlining map then and now. And even the fight for voting rights has that same historical issue. That was the crown jewel of Reverend Martin Luther King's work, is securing the Voting Rights Act. And people 50 years later, 57 years later, are still fighting that piece of legislation. They're just defanging it and taking the teeth out one at a time to make it snag a tooth. We're going to have election issues all across the nation. I'm seeing record numbers of money going into district attorney races and to Secretary of State races on who's going to validate and invalidate these elections. So we're going to have to come out in overwhelming numbers. But I think the Democrats have to push back and say it loud, clearly. And I don't think we can talk about bringing in the African American community if we don't address their economics. Most African Americans are employed by African Americans. As we talk about this contracting that's coming out of the federal government and the CARES Act and the Inflation Act, how do we enforce economic justice so that people that live in communities can close the gap? People will naturally close it, but the rules and the regulation are locking them out. So I want to I'm going to solicit everyone's help in saying, let's make sure there's contract and compliance. Neighborhoods will naturally grow and achieve economic parity when we take the impediments out of their way. All the little nuances are in these contracts. So there's trillions of dollars that have been passed. Let's not let it pass our communities by. And that will give our communities buy-in to the Democratic message. When do we win and what do we get?
Good. All right, let me close with an issue that I talk about, not a whole lot of other people do. And in our country today, we have more income and wealth inequality than any time perhaps in the history of this country. You got 3 people who own more wealth, if you can believe it, than the bottom half of American society. You got about 45% of all new income goes to the top 1%. During the pandemic, as everybody here knows, some of you have talked about, workers had to go to work, they died, and yet the billionaire class saw a $2 trillion increase in their wealth. All right, you got billionaires controlling our economy, billionaires controlling, not controlling, but having a significant impact on our political life with their super PACs and campaign contributions, billionaires owning a significant part of the media. All right, what do you all think? Am I overstating the issue or am I right?
You are right.
Right?
You're absolutely right. And I think, Senator, this connects us to the question about being a Democrat and why Democrats are leaving. One question that I kept getting asked and we kept talking about in my race was, what kind of Democrat do we want to represent you in Congress? And the truth is that a lot of people were disillusioned with what they've seen. And disillusioned from Democrats, certainly from Republicans. When I keep hearing people say, it's harder and harder for me to afford childcare. I don't know what I'm going to do because I can't afford to take time off to care for my parent who's aging, and a healthcare system that is so broken that I have to literally choose between an emergency room because I won't go to the doctor unless I absolutely need to, or paying my mortgage because I can't afford it or it's taxes. This is the reality for people every single day. And bottom line, I said this in my race, I was outspent by my opponent. I was told there was no way that I could actually run against him because of the money he was bringing in the first quarter. And I had made a commitment not to take $1 from corporate contributions. And I said, what kind of Democrat do you want? A corporate lobbyist that has worked for the utility company and has lobbied for detention centers that calls himself a Democrat and uses fear mongering? Or someone that understands what you're going through because I have personally experienced it myself. And I think that when we talk about the income inequality, this is so real front and center for people right now. What are we doing in Congress? What are we doing in our own states so that people could actually not have to work till they're 85? And what people keep saying is, yeah, well, you're going to take money from the corporations. Before we know it, you're going to be just like them. People are disillusioned, and it is our responsibility to be speaking truth to power the way you do every single day. And to talk about how money and politics, in many ways, is the reason we don't have Medicare for all, is the reason why people don't have a living wage, because $15 an hour at this point in the city of Chicago and many parts of this country, you got to work 2 jobs at $15 an hour to be able to survive, let alone thrive. So I really think I said this before, but I said this in my campaign in the wealthiest parts of my district, which by the way, I won with 44-point lead in a 4-way race. And in the poorest parts of my district, we have to take on corporations, because if we don't, all of us are going to see that impact in our livelihood and our ability to do anything good for people.
Who else wants to jump in on that issue? Maxwell, I see you shaking your head.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree. And that's why we need, we talk about litmus tests, we talk about all this, but I think it's important that every Democrat should want to build a world where we have ended Citizens United, right? Where we ensure that big money cannot come in and dictate the politics of our communities. And we need to ensure that we level the playing field. But, the other thing I'll also talk about is like election integrity and ensuring that we do everything we can to reform the elections process. This has been the hardest year of my life running for office. I'm sure it's been for everybody on this call. But I'll tell you, as a candidate, you don't get paid, right? And I'm a young guy. I didn't have a lot of money in the bank. I didn't save up a lot of money, and I found myself 3 months in with no money in my bank. Had to start Ubering nights to pay my bills and to get food. And I'm not saying this for sympathy, but just saying, this is something that people go through across the country. And imagine the world we'd live in if this process was destigmatized and more accessible to working class families. Because I can tell you, in my current economic condition, if I had kids, I couldn't have run for office. I couldn't have done it. And so for me, it's like, let's push to destigmatize the process. Let's push to get big money out of politics. Let's push to have publicly funded elections, hopefully one day in the future. So that way we level the playing field, and poor and working class families and people can come to the table, and we can have a Congress and a government, not just at the federal level, but at the state level and the county level, that look like the country. And that means, yes, race, yes, an age, but also an experience and where you come from. And when you come with that experience to office, you come with the urgency that it deserves. And I think that's the biggest gap. I believe a lot of people in Congress believe that these are issues, but the problem is, do they believe in the urgency of dealing with them right now? And I think we can fix that by getting big money out of politics.
Greg, you want to jump into this discussion?
I think I so deeply appreciate, Maxwell, what you just mentioned about improving our democracy and how that will address inequality. Something else that I've seen in Texas is how, when we also build democracy in our workplaces, how that closes inequality, how the trade union movement and democracy in our workplace has been what has kept corporate profits from soaring so far above productivity that workers have to keep up. But also democracy in our housing. I had a set of mobile home parks here in my district that were bought up by big corporate investors that said that tenants were like customers chained to Waffle House booths, where they could keep jacking up the rent and forcing people to pay more and more. What we did was we brought the community together and brought in public money so that the tenants could buy the mobile home community for themselves. And now they own it cooperatively and they set the rent. That's when you bring democracy, not just to your workplace, but also to housing, also to our public utility. We have managed to hold on to our electric utility as a public utility so the people profit instead of shareholders. So we together democratically set what the electricity rate is. We democratically decided to go from a dirty utility to one that's overwhelmingly renewable, the biggest shift. And that's when we bring democracy both to the voting booth, but also to our workplaces, through the trade union movement, through the tenants union movement. We have to organize everywhere, and that's how we actually hold more powerful interests most accountable.
Well, on that note, let me kind of conclude the discussion. And first of all, I got to tell you guys, you have moved me. You made me 10 years younger tonight. No, it is fantastic to see this kind of energy and intelligence and decency coming into the U.S. Congress. I just want to conclude and say to the viewers, you made their elections possible. These are working class candidates who in most cases, I think in all cases, did not get super PAC money, got small contributions, built grassroots networks where people were knocking on doors, and you all did it. And that's precisely these campaigns, I'm familiar with all of them, are really a model for what we should be doing all across the country. So I thank all of the candidates for being with us tonight. I look forward to working with them when they get sworn in. But I think the last point that I want to make is in a sense, a message of hope. My experience is that no matter whether you call yourself a Republican, Democrat, Independent, whatever, the truth of the matter is, and kind of the corporate media and the establishment, they'll tell you this. Guess what? Most people in this country think healthcare is a human right, and the healthcare system today is dysfunctional. Most people think the pharmaceutical industry are a bunch of crooks ripping us off. Most people understand that we have to make public colleges and universities tuition free so their kids can have the opportunities that they need to thrive in this world. Most people understand that the child care system is a disaster. Most people understand that if we don't get our act together in terms of climate, we're not going to have much of a planet to leave to our children and future generations. Most people think that the wealthy should start paying their fair share of taxes. And our job is not to allow the demagogues to divide us up on nonsense, on what I would call bullshit issues, and to keep focusing on those important issues of racial justice and gender justice, all of those issues, which in fact have majority support in this country. And if we do that, and if we have the courage, and this is not easy, what I didn't get to in tonight is these guys have taken on a lot of billionaire corporate PAC money thrown into their districts. And that ain't easy. And the power that those guys have in Washington is enormous. But if we stand together as a people and tell these billionaires that they cannot continue to control our economy and our political life, that we need a democracy, and that means an economic democracy, as well as a political democracy, a racial democracy, etc. If we do all those things, I think the future is with us. And I think anybody who's listened to this program and heard the 6 new members of Congress know that the future, in fact, is with us. So to all of the candidates, I want to thank you so much for being here tonight and for the great campaigns that you ran, and I very much look forward to working with you next year. Thank you all very much. Viewers, thank you very much for being with us. Good night.